Hey, my relatives. Good afternoon. Good morning to some of you on the West Coast and other parts of the country. It's about 12:30 here in Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting down enjoying my second cup of coffee. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts. I've been reflecting today on kind of the aftermath of Indigenous Peoples Day and what's happening in our nation. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts about that with you this morning. So, before I begin, as I always do, let me start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from what is now known as Washington, D.C., and that these are the lands of the Piscataway. And I want to thank and honor the Piscataway for being the host people of these lands. I want to just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So, yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day, and it was very interesting to see what's happening in our country right now because we're beginning to hold these two things in tension of both Indigenous Peoples Day and Columbus Day. For most of my life, the issue of Columbus Day was primarily attention only for Indigenous peoples. And we would kind of note that on that day was not appropriate. It was not a good holiday for us to be having. But excuse me, my cat is kind of going a little crazy. Hold on just a second. I apologize for that. My cat was meowing, and so I just had to shut the door and put him out in the hall there for a moment. But anyway, so the issue is that over the my lifetime, Indigenous Peoples Day was primarily a day that our Columbus Day was primarily a day where Indigenous Peoples Day recognized it was an appropriate holiday, but the nation didn't really wrestle with it and wasn't really concerned about it. And over the past several years, that's begun changing. And I remember when the thought of an Indigenous Peoples Day was first being floated around the country, and some communities were trying it out. And my initial response was, I love the idea of an Indigenous Peoples Day, but I didn't know if I wanted to see it happen on Columbus Day. Not because I wanted to continue honor Columbus, but I didn't want our nation to forget the horrors of what came because of Columbus and this whole notion of discovery. And so my initial thought was we should probably have Indigenous Peoples Day on another day. Why do we need to have it on Columbus Day? And can we, instead of honoring Columbus, can we turn that day into a day of lament, into a day of mourning, recognizing the things that happened there? But I didn't feel, I wasn't wanting to detract from the people who were trying to establish an Indigenous Peoples Day. And so I would share those thoughts in some conferences occasionally, but I wasn't really adamant about that. And I was just more kind of waiting to see and watching what was going to happen around the country. And I think last year, and especially this year, I actually began to really appreciate how um, what's happening in our nation. If for no other reason, where it's really highlighting the hypocrisy of our country and the way it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. This was the first year that there was actually a presidential proclamation for Indigenous Peoples Day, and it was ironic because not only did President Biden do an Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation, but he also did a Columbus Day proclamation. And I shared my thoughts on that a few days ago over my second cup of coffee. So you're welcome to look that up on my YouTube channel. It's up there on my Twitter and on my Facebook. But right, it really kind of highlighted how our nation doesn't know what to do with this tension. And even his Columbus Day proclamation acknowledged the atrocious violence enacted against Indigenous peoples because of this whole idea of discovery, or because of what happened because of the colonization due to Columbus. And yesterday, I really enjoyed the fact that it was It was a day, it was an opportunity to press the nation in that we can't have both of these things coexisting, right? We cannot both honor Columbus and honor our indigenous peoples. That's not, we have no integrity to try and do both. Because so much violence came not only from Columbus himself, but from what he brought into this continent, into this whole hemisphere, right? Not only can we 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 can't honor both of those events at the same time. And so it became very apparent, I think, yesterday that there is this tension going on in our nation. And I decided, I actually feel like I really appreciate that tension. I love the fact that Indigenous Peoples Day taking place on Columbus Day forces the conversation. And every year on Columbus Day, my social media kind of takes off and explodes, and there's a lot of engagement. One of the videos that's most popular on all of my social media is a video I put up back in 2012. It's on YouTube. It's titled "A Native American Perspective on Columbus Day." I'll actually share that in the comment section here right now. Every year that gets several thousand views as people Google Columbus Day and they find that video, and it gets a lot of play. It's the metaphor of the grandmother in the house that I use frequently in my speaking. And so I just shared that in the chat or in the comment section right now. But yeah, so every year my social media really takes off. And yesterday on my social media, I put up a graphic where I use the phrase that we have in the book, "You cannot discover lands already inhabited." And I then put happy, and I crossed out Columbus Day, and I put Indigenous Peoples Day, and then Unsettling Truths at the bottom. I shared that on my Instagram, on my Twitter, and on my Facebook. And it was by far my most popular post on all three platforms throughout the day, but also was one of my most popular posts in several weeks, if not a few months. And so it was really good to see that posts go beyond my normal sphere of influence or of reach on my social media, and it got to a lot of new audiences. And one of the ways I could tell a lot of audiences, and this was most clear on Facebook, where I think it got the most promotion, is the number of people who were pushing back and who were being adamant, no, you can discover lands already inhabited. Columbus did discover America, and just kind of making that nonsensical argument. And so again, I don't usually respond to those types of comments because I don't ever find them fruitful. But I did find it refreshing that that post, and especially that graphic, reached outside of my normal social media platform, and got a lot of people who had probably never heard of the doctrine of discovery or have never thought about it from this perspective. And it really made them at least angry enough to respond or to say something. And so again, it exposed them to a new idea. But it was very interesting to see how there is this tension now, because Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated, I think, in about 12 states and maybe over 60 plus cities around the country. It is creating a tension in our nation, and it's forcing us to have a dialogue. And I really think that's healthy. I think that's a very good thing. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited about what's going on right now, and I'm interested and even looking forward to already next year, and thinking, how can we even continue to press the conversation even further? Not in a disrespectful way, not in a demeaning way, but how can we continue to press this with really this just very straightforward observation, which we use in the book, and many people state in many different forms, not just myself. But you can't discover lands already inhabited, right? That's not discovery. It's something else. You can call it colonization, you can call it ethnic cleansing, you can call it conquering, whatever you want, but don't call it discovery. And that's the conversation I really want to see pressed. And so I was glad to see that yesterday. I also want to share in the comment section. If you follow me on social media, you know that I had one of my main events canceled, or not canceled, postponed. I was actually supposed to be in Albuquerque, New Mexico today and tomorrow, speaking at an event at the Pueblo Indian Cultural Center. And about a week and a half ago, that event got moved entirely online and it got postponed about a month. So I won't be speaking now until the 16th, I believe, of November, the week before Thanksgiving. And so my schedule suddenly opened up literally right before Indigenous Peoples Day. And I was able to, there was a group in Portland that was doing a virtual event, and I had an opportunity to speak there. It was a virtual event, and so I was able to do it online from my home here in DC. And I was really given kind of an opportunity to speak about whatever I wanted. I had 35 to 40 minutes, and I could address whatever I wanted to address. And so I spent most of the weekend to kind of ponder, what did I want to say? What did I feel was most important to say on Indigenous Peoples Day? And one of the way that I framed it, and I'm going to share this link in the comment section right now so you can get it. It's on Facebook. And they did an 8-hour live stream. They began at 10 a.m. Eastern, and they went, I think, till maybe 4 or 5 p.m. not Eastern, Pacific. They began at 10 a.m. Pacific and went till 4 or 5 p.m. Pacific time, maybe even later. And I spoke on that video. If you click on that link, I spoke around the 1 hour and 47 minute mark is where my presentation began. And I spoke for about 45 minutes. And I attempted to do several things. I won't repeat the entire presentation, but I attempted to do several things, which is first, I did a short intro on the doctrine of discovery and why the whole notion of celebrating Columbus is so troubling. And then I talked about how over the past even year and a half, there's been a lot of what you could almost call progress being made within Indian country, whether it's shows on national platforms like Hulu with Reservation Dogs, whether it's having a Native American Secretary of the Interior and other prominent political leaders around the country, whether, there's a lot of ways you could say, even some Supreme Court case rulings where you could say, yeah, there's been some progress made in the visibility and in the voice of Native communities and Native peoples. And yet, I asked the question, how can we honor and acknowledge the people who are making these breakthroughs, such as Deb Haaland, such as Peggy Flanagan, such as all the staff and the crew at Reservation Dogs? How can we honor them without centering whiteness and white people? And many times the language we use, while it acknowledges the Native voices or the marginalized voices, it acknowledges it in a way that centers whiteness, right? When we say Deb Haaland is the first Native American cabinet secretary, right? What that does is it centers Joe Biden. Here's this president who did something really unusual, and he has our first Native. And while that may sound all good and great, it's actually not anything it's something great for Deb, right? Deb Haaland is a fantastic woman. I love her vision. I support her fully. But Joe Biden is in a long line of white landowning male presidents. And it's been over 250 years. And this is the first time they've ever nominated a Native American woman for a cabinet secretary position. Why are we celebrating that, right? If this is a nation that truly prides itself on equality, why are we giving props to Joe Biden for doing something that should have been done probably, if not decades ago, centuries ago? So again, how do we acknowledge people from the margins who are doing really incredible work without centering the white landowning men in power who are inviting them into or giving them spots in some of these positions, and even doing the best they can to even mute or at least curtail their voices in that space? And I talk about that in the presentation yesterday. And so this is one of the things I really want to press in our conversation right now is how do we acknowledge and honor the incredible work, not only of Native peoples, but of African Americans and other marginalized people, LGBTQIA2S plus, women who are doing some really incredible stuff. How do we center and acknowledge and honor their work and their efforts and what they're doing without centering white landowning men? And that's a conversation I'm going to continue to press further on, but I talked about that fairly extensively in that presentation. And then I ended my presentation by honoring many Native peoples, because it was Indigenous Peoples Day, a day to honor the Indigenous hosts of Turtle Island. I had a list of Indigenous peoples, some in the public space, some who are not very well known, are not in the public space, people who I know personally. And I just spoke about them and what I see them doing and how I want to honor them. And so I invite you to watch that video. And it's a conversation I definitely want to continue to press further as we continue talking, and as I continue to try and move this dialogue further. So anyway, these are some of the things that I'm thinking about and talking about. One of the other things I was very grateful for is my book actually got a lot of exposure yesterday, and so I'm going to share a link here. If you have not read my book yet, you can actually purchase a signed copy of my book on my website. And this is the book I co-authored with my good friend Sing-Chan Ra. And our publisher, and this is not a paid promotion, but this is just a contest that they're running and that I saw yesterday online, where in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day, they begin to highlight two of their Indigenous books that are authored by Indigenous authors. And they ran a contest yesterday. And so I'm going to share the link to that on their Instagram page. And if you want to enter that contest, you can get a free copy of two of the books. One is the First Nations version of the New Testament, which has been in the works for a long time. And then another is my book, the book I co-authored with Sing-Chan Ra, Unsettling Truth. And so there's a way you can enter a contest on the publisher's page and get a free book out of that if you would like that. So anyway, I was very encouraged to see how much exposure our book was getting yesterday, and there was a lot of people quoting from it and referencing it and talking about it. And I still believe very strongly that this book, Unsettling Truth, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery, has a lot of legs left in it. I'm very convinced that the conversation we're calling for in that book, even though it was published 2 years ago, still can reach a large segment of our country. And I'm really looking forward to this next year of how do I begin to promote this book outside of my own social media sphere of influence, right? Which is what I've done for the past year. But how do I begin to move it into these other spaces and see what kind of conversations we begin to start beyond people who just follow me on social media? Or maybe how do I expand my social media reach so that it gets even broader than it is right now? But I'm very excited to see what can happen in this next year, as I've been very encouraged. I had a meeting with our publisher a few weeks ago, and they've told me, and I've seen this even in my own observations, is that the book continues to sell very well. It has not had its normal drop off that most books will have after, especially after a year or two after publication. And our book is still selling at a fairly solid level, especially for a book of its reach. And so I have this hope and even this confidence that if we can somehow get it into some of these other spaces, we can continue to move that conversation forward, laying out this history, creating this common memory, and ultimately even calling for this National Truth and Conciliation Commission, or this dialogue on race, gender, and class. So anyway, those are just some of the thoughts I've had yesterday regarding this day. I want to thank everybody who helped both celebrate and honor the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. I want to just express my incredible gratitude for everyone who who has been working to push these conversations forward, and who are doing what you can to change the dialogue within our nation. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for everything that you're doing for those who helped move this dialogue forward to the space where we are now, and even where we're going to go in the next few years and decades. So, Ahiahat, my relatives, I hope you have a really good day. And I'm hoping to be doing my second cup of coffee throughout the week, every day, hopefully a little bit earlier. I want to get in the pattern of just sitting down and having a bit more of a casual chat rather than a very in-depth or intense discussion. And so I'm going to sit down and talk a little more off the cuff with a little less prep time, but just some time to sit down and reflect on things going on immediately, whether it's in the news or things that are going on or things I've just been talking about. And also beginning to think about who I'll have on as guests to join me more frequently for my second cup of coffee, so we can have some more in this space that we're trying to curate here. So I hope your coffee is as good as mine is this morning. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm actually hoping I'll be able to see a sunrise sometime in the next week. We have literally have had overcast skies for almost the past, especially early in the morning, for the past almost 10 days. And I feel like we're in Portland or in Seattle a little bit. But there's supposed to be some more cloudy or clear days or even partly cloudy days coming up. And I'm hoping to be able to get down and to see the sunrise soon. I haven't seen one in almost over a week now, a week and a half maybe. But anyway, walk in beauty, my relatives. Maybe we learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakon that.